Welcome to another episode of Living with FASD, a program for and by someone with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. So, this is a human interest and educational show geared for those with living with the effects of prenatal alcohol exposure, their family and loved ones, and anyone else wanting to learn more about fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Today, our very special guest is Dr. Gilbert David from the UK, and I have recently made his acquaintance, and I'm so delighted to have him come to the mic today and talk about his very, very important work. Dr. David, thank you. So, Dr. Gilbert, your name is backwards on your thing.
Thank you, Patricia. It's
Okay.
fine. It's all right. I don't pick offense if I'm called David or Gilbert. It's perfectly fine.
So much for avoiding awkward moments.
Thank you, thank you. It's always beautiful in the midst of a very busy day to have. Of course, I know we have time differences, but
Yeah.
it's beautiful to have these awkward moments. It relieves you of the stress of being too serious,
Right?
researching and
Yeah.
reading. So yeah.
Well, we'll get that awkward moment out of the way, and the rest of the conversation will be golden. So,
Thank
and I
you.
actually I think when people have a last name that's also a first name, it can be
Yeah.
confusing, right? And my
No.
pediatrician's first name was Gilbert. So
All
I think
right.
I was kind of set up for that
Do you
little
think he's related to me in some way?
I kind of doubt it.
Right. He may be. You need
And
to check
unless
again.
you came from farmland in Ohio, probably not.
Ooh, right. All right. I rest my case there, then,
Yeah,
Patricia.
yeah, because that's where my mom grew up was in
Right.
farmland outside of Akron, which is not too terribly far from Lake Erie. So
Right. Right. Right.
anyway, yeah, on that happy note. So you are working at the University of Salford, is that right?
That's correct. That's
And
correct.
and from what I understand, that is like the place in the UK for FASD research. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, I would say yes, because I think we sort of know that we have. And this is from ranking of in some of the organizations that rank
Okay.
impact in, or rather the impact of scientific research teams. And we know we have been recognized as the largest team
Okay.
researching FASD, and somehow I'm getting the vibes recently that it looks like with the way the team is expanding, it is sort of reaching out to almost becoming, one of the significant teams in Europe in terms of size and specialty.
Okay.
We're just watching and seeing how that develops, really.
Okay. So for Salford, what all kinds of things is the university digging into?
Well, I think first of all, I would say we have seen over the years that the university consistently has shown commitment in creating a very rich and robust environment for FASD research. And this is, by, of course, creating as much resources as possible to, provide enablement that we as researchers, within this area are
Mhm.
encouraged to keep up, the work we do in creating research evidence about this condition. Because, as you may know, the UK is quite a bit backward in that sense in the level of awareness compared to the rest of the world, compared to countries like the US, Canada, Australia. And so essentially the university is committed to sort of ensuring that researchers are encouraged to continue work in this area because
Mhm.
of how impactful this area of work could be, and how FASD impacts could potentially impact the population generally.
Okay. So Is Salford's reputation for FASD why you chose Salford for your doctorate degree?
Well, I think it formed part of it because
Okay.
essentially, and I know maybe this may be a conversation we get into a bit more formally later, but I got a scholarship to study at the University of Salford, a fully
Okay.
funded scholarship for my master's degree. And it was towards the tail end of that degree when we as master students were meant to choose project topics that I sort of decided to go through the range of research that was going on here at the University of Salford, and FASD, just caught my eye, and
Okay.
essentially that's where the journey started. And
Okay.
of course, looking at the team and all of the support and resources, it really informed my trajectory in choosing the university for my doctorate degree. Certainly,
Okay.
yes.
So what was the connection? What formed that personal tie to this topic, right? For you to dedicate your career to fetal alcohol spectrum. Um, what what's that connection for you?
Well, thank you. I think I appreciate the way you sort of phrased that question, Patricia. Because really, yes, I think I've discovered finally that for me, FASD is not just a one-off engagement. It has sort of become a career for me.
Mm,
And that's just, again, just because of what I've seen so far in my research, speaking to the families, the young people, and it just sticks with me in that sense that you just go to bed at night and you wonder what is going on here. Something has got to be done about this.
mm,
But in terms of laying the foundation for this passion, I would sort of relay back to my training initially. So I trained as a biochemist initially. I trained in biochemistry for my undergraduate,
mhm,
after which I then went on to work in the pharmaceutical industry in West Africa as a medical representative for a number of years. I rose up to the rank of being an area manager. But then I have always been interested in academics. My heart has
mhm,
always been in research in academics, and I kept seeking opportunities. And I mean, thankfully, the opportunity to gain a scholarship and study at the University of Salford came my way. It was fully funded, and I was like, yes, here we go. I resigned everything, forgot about my old life, packed my bags, and certainly I was at Salford, just to commence studying.
mhm,
But looking back really on my experience in the pharmaceutical industry, because at the time my role had to do with patients who had terminal ailments. I mean, terminal cancers and all of those sort of end of life ailments. Looking back, that experience really formed the foundation for what attracted me to FASD. And what I mean by that is really at that point while working with these patients, I knew as a professional at the time that it was maybe practically impossible to completely cure them. But
mhm,
because they had a correct diagnosis, they had access to, sort of positive outcomes potentially because the diagnosis was correct. And
mhm.
then we could then begin to think of interventions that could at least give them some certain level of quality lives, really.
Yeah.
But then when I came to Salford, looking for a project, like I said earlier, I stumbled across the project being led by Professor Penny Cook. So
Mhm,
Professor Penny Cook and Professor Raja Mukherjee, alongside Professor Claire Lele, are the research leads here at the University of Salford. So they lead the research group. And I came across the research they do. And what really caught my attention and I've not recovered from is the idea of misdiagnosis, and underdiagnosis. And that hit me like a massive bomb. And I tell you, that sort of ignited the fire to say, well, this is something I want to look into a bit
yeah.
more. And my master's degree was research with social workers. And then right after that, I thought, well, um, whether I'm funded or not, whether I get a scholarship or not, I will pay out of pocket to do a PhD and
Mm.
research FASD and the justice system. And that's how I ended up going into this research.
So why looking at it with the lens of the justice system?
Well, during my master's working with social workers, it clearly became very obvious that, well, Um, of course, outside the social services, one of the very key places where FASD will be really prevalent is the justice system, because we know from international evidence that individuals with FASD are 19 times more likely to encounter the justice system.
Yeah.
And I make this point really clear, which I know you already will be very familiar with. I make this clear to journalists and the public and whoever I speak to that this does not mean that individuals with FASD are natural criminals. No, it doesn't mean that because they have FASD, automatically they would be locked up in prison. They will commit a crime. No, all that it says from my research and some of the research that we know is that FASD in itself can create a context where certain behaviors relevant to the justice system could be
Mm-hmm.
exhibited. So the
Mm-hmm.
individuals are not criminal. No, it's not that because they have FASD, then genetically they are modified and conditioned into crime. No, it's just that features of FASD could just provide that context for engagement with the justice system.
Yeah. Yeah. And and I know a lot of that is we tend to be very suggestible and gullible and things like that. But before we dive down that path, I definitely want to support what you're saying there, that um, FASD does not mean we are inherently bad people,
No, not
right?
at all.
I
So,
would and just from the lay person, because I've not spent any focus in the criminal justice system. I would
right,
say that there's two types of FASD people that get in trouble with the law.
right,
One is the person who is suggestible and gullible and set up by others
yeah,
because of their
yes,
lifetime of loneliness and
mm,
rejection and
mm,
needing to belong, that
right,
they are taken advantage of by
right,
others in the criminal element, who
mm,
want a patsy, who want someone to take the fall for them. So
right.
I would say that's one category of people who end up in the
Mm.
justice system. And then the other would be the people who have had not just FASD, but all kinds of adverse childhood experiences that have left them so very frustrated and
No.
angry and depressed, and
Mhm.
just that they turn into a powder keg.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would say that would be the other extreme. But most of us, I think, don't end up in the justice system at all.
Yes.
If we
Certainly.
look at the diagnostic rate,
Yeah.
even though our prevalence rate is sky high, right?
Yes.
One in
Yes.
20 people,
Yeah.
um, the diagnostic rate is abysmal. It's
Mm.
0.01%
Yeah.
ever get
Yeah.
diagnosed. So there's millions upon millions of people that have been stumbling and fumbling their way through life
Yeah.
without understanding
Yeah.
that
What exactly?
their quirks and their struggles are neurologically based, right?
Yeah.
And
Certainly.
so we have families, we have careers,
Yes.
and
Yes. Certainly.
I was 56 when I figured it out.
Right.
And
Yeah.
through interviewing people for Sip by Sip, there's a lot of people out there who never knew until they were in their late 30s, 40s, 50s, and
Certainly.
oftentimes they figure it out when they start looking at FASD for their
Yeah.
children or
Yeah.
adopted children. It's
That's
like,
right.
oh, this feels familiar.
This
you
looks like
know?
me. This looks like me. This
Yeah.
sounds like, yeah. Certainly.
Yeah.
Certainly. And
So
yes. Go on, please.
so you do a lot of research around suggestibility and gullibility and
Yeah.
all that. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, I'm happy to talk about this, but I just thought the point you brought last before the question is really a powerful point. And this is sort of exactly what some of the arguments I make are in the papers I publish. That first of all, like we've all agreed, it doesn't mean because you have FASD, then you are in the justice system
Yes.
automatically. No. The second point is, and I think a recent paper again published, which is still in preprint, I think. But then one of the things I did argue with the justice, or rather as a recommendation to the justice system, is in terms of custodial or rehabilitation plans or probation plans, it's very important to identify the positives and the strengths of individuals of FASD because what you've just said about having careers, about having lives, certainly ties down to the areas of their of capabilities.
Yeah.
So it's important for this system, because it's easy for individuals to sort of go on one lane and say, oh, individuals with FASD are suggestible and all of that. But you need to look at the other side and leverage on those positives to be able to help them live the full lives they deserve. So
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
strong argument, and I am really hopeful and passionate about carrying forth that argument.
Mhm.
But on the side of the research, yes, truly, that's my focus. And the reason for that is, and it's easy to get into, sort of a divided line of arguments to say, oh, the suggestibility research is sort of pointing out what the shortfalls are without looking at what the positive side is. But what I've tried to do in my research is to marry these two because they are equally important.
Mhm.
What the suggestibility research I focus on is just wanting to experimentally, prove to the justice system that you need to modify the approach when you're dealing with individuals exposed to alcohol right
Mhm.
from the womb who have FASD. And for my PhD, what I did do was to assess individuals with FASD adolescents who have a diagnosis of FASD and compare them to controls who did not have FASD.
Mhm.
And I used a standard forensic tool. It's been used in prisons and so many other settings. It's been used with people who had intellectual disability, people
Mhm.
with autism, with ADHD, but it's never been employed in the FASD population. The only study that existed before the work I did in my PhD was a study by Professor Natalie Brown in the US. I'm sure you would have met her a number of times. She's been a lovely mentor to me. They
I
conducted a
have not
study,
yet.
right?
I I did send her an email that's probably sitting in her spam box.
Oh, bless. Yes, she's lovely. She certainly is. She's been a real useful guide to me on my
Yeah.
journey. Um,
Yeah. We all need
she
good
and
mentors.
Definitely. She with Paul Connor and Richard Ladd, the group in the US, they are quite interested in this subject of the justice system, and they conducted a study in 2011, which they used this same tool to assess 7 adults who had FASD, and that's the only standing study that had measured this before now.
Mhm.
And they also worked in collaboration with Professor Gisli Gudjonsen, who developed that suggestibility tool. I've been in touch with him too. He's been really helpful. He's guided me all along my research journey and is still guiding me.
Good.
But then with the PhD, I managed to assess 52 young people to then sort of compare this issue of suggestibility, confabulation, compliance to see, exactly what the differences are between the two groups. So that's
Mhm.
just a bit of a plain summary of the work on suggestibility.
So for the audience, compliance is when you're asked or told to do something, you really don't want to do it, but you do it anyway to avoid a negative consequence. Is that accurate?
Yes, so in this context, they are very closely related concepts: suggestibility, compliance, and there's a third one known as acquiescence. For
Uh,
my PhD, I didn't look at acquiescence because of time limitations, but with this, I've launched an international study at the moment, which I'm happy to share about later on, but I'm looking at that factor. So all
okay.
of these three factors are really closely related, and they all sort of impact things like false confessions,
Hmm.
ease of manipulation to committing crimes, ease of admission of guilt, even when the individual is innocent.
Hmm.
Suggestibility is when the individual would actually accept suggestions from, say, an interviewer, many times in a closed setting, and they would say yes to things they they never committed, or situations really that just because suggestions were given to them. And
Hmm.
when the person says yes to you, they genuinely think that the answer they are giving you is genuine, is correct, because suggestions have been implanted into their minds.
Hmm.
That's suggestibility. Compliance, like you briefly described, this individual says yes to you, but he walks away knowing that internally, the yes is not the right answer. I should have given Patricia.
Yeah.
But because there is sort of power imbalance. Patricia is a person in authority, or just for any other instrumental gain, I've just said yes. But internally, they know that the correct answer to what I'm giving you is no. They are
Hmm.
just compliant. They just
Hmm.
sort of, easily. And I know there's a bit of um, confusion in the use of the terms because of how closely related they are. But
Yeah.
clearly, with suggestibility, the person's intention or really their thoughts is that, look,
Hmm.
yes is the right answer. They've been completely swayed over. They have accepted
Right.
your
Right.
suggestions. For compliance, there's consciousness that really this is not the right answer. The person is
Yeah.
aware of it.
Yeah.
And all of these are vulnerabilities that can play. Acquiescence on the other side
Yeah.
is
And
just saying, yes, sorry, go on.
and another one is gullibility. So
Yes.
how is gullibility different from suggestibility?
So essentially, I have not worked with the factor called gullibility, but I certainly know that it intersects with suggestibility a lot of times, just because there's that element of the person believing, the suggestion to be true and giving it back to you.
Hmm.
And certainly, all of these factors we are discussing about this afternoon here in the UK and morning for you in the US, all of these, they always intersect. There's
Yeah.
always that gray line to be able to tease out what is at work here, what is happening here is,
Hmm. Hmm.
especially with compliance, is quite a tricky factor to identify. But
Yeah.
interestingly, all of them merge together to produce that output of,
Yeah.
false
And
confession, ease of manipulation, and all of that.
and I think we see that early on in life, in for instance, the school or neighborhood setting,
Yeah.
when someone with FASD is so often the target of bullies,
Mm, mm,
right?
mm.
And I think one of the things that leads us to be vulnerable,
Yeah.
as I was saying earlier, we're so accustomed to being rejected,
Mm,
because the kids are cruel to people who are deemed to be different.
that's right.
And,
That's right.
that leaves us socially vulnerable
That's right.
to, when we are approached by those with nefarious intentions,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
want to believe that it is a sincere motive of friendship
Mm,
when
yeah.
it's probably seldom that.
Yeah. I think this is quite another important point you've raised because I remember at the onset of this interview, you did mention about the intersection of, things like adverse experiences that lead
Hmm.
to encounters with the justice system. That's such an important point, especially within the research I do, because we know from studies on other populations, this has not really been evident in individuals who FASD experimentally, and which is sort of again one of the factors that I am
Hmm.
looking into with this second round of research I have started.
And
Um,
I
we
think
know
that's
that,
so cool because, from the outside looking in, I can describe what we all see,
yeah,
but you're the person that puts meat on the bones and says, yes, you're right, because, right? You've come up with the research.
yeah. Well, we all put meat to the bones, Patricia, because I think I'm a firm believer in this sort of coming together with all that we have on the table to advance, knowledge within the field of play we find ourselves.
Mm,
Certainly you with the lived experience, others with the lived experience, that they make me see better. They make me
mhm,
understand better, because um, things I would have probably assumed as a researcher sitting and trying to design a research. If I don't sit with you to get your lived experience and your perspective, look, this is how it works, Gilbert,
mm,
then I am just groping in darkness in my own thoughts. So
yeah,
all I'm trying to say really, together we combine to certainly put meat on the bones.
yeah,
But yes, that lived experience, that input makes me, design better research, better experimental work to,
yeah,
provide evidence to the justice system and professionals to say, look, this is what the lived experience,
yeah.
is, and this is what the research says, and you must listen to both. You must listen to those with lived experience or living experience story, and you must listen.
Yeah.
Certainly, research, you just can't do away with it. It is proven, it's hardcore science, so you
Hmm.
can't deny
Hmm.
this.
And I think that, and in fact, my mind has gone a zillion directions with that already. um I really appreciate that humbleness, right? The move FASD United, right? That's the organization that sponsored the Seattle conference this year.
Yeah, that's
um
right.
their theme for 2024 is we want a seat at the table, right? And if you look at the ALC change makers, the adult
Yeah,
leadership collaboration, that is their motto pretty
yeah,
much, right?
yeah,
Nothing about us without us.
yeah,
And so they have come alongside researchers and helped to guide them in the
yeah,
way you just described. And I
yeah.
think that's when we get um, quality
Output.
outcomes, right?
Yeah,
And
certainly,
the most
certainly.
useful information, because
Yeah,
without seeking the guidance of people with lived experience, then
yeah,
you risk the work that, not but researchers miss the opportunity to
yeah,
um, to expand their horizons, right?
yeah,
And because I think all of us, whether we're lay people like myself or
yeah.
researchers like you, we tend to be myopic. We get
Mm,
so caught up in what we're focused on that we lose sight of the
yeah,
bigger picture. And
yeah,
research for so long has been
yeah,
geared to that narrow slice of the pie called FAS,
yeah, yeah, certainly.
and
And
forgetting
yes,
about the rest of the spectrum.
yeah, I mean, it's certainly a shame that that has happened, I will say, historically, but I can't imagine research without living experience.
Mhm.
You need to listen to those who live in experience. It's crucial. And I tell you what, in my personal experience, even designing the current research that I do, one of the most impactful feedback I have received has been from people who live in experience, like I have consulted the ALC severally over a couple of months in designing the current research, and we sort of have that relationship to say I would still, of course, come back to
Yeah.
provide updates and just walk along as the research progresses.
Yeah.
But I always go away from that meeting thinking, oh my God, I never foresaw this. I never saw this.
Hmm.
That just keeps being the repetition of thoughts I have because of really valuable feedback, things you would really just go away thinking, oh, this is all right. So for me, it's been a life-changing experience speaking to people who live in experience. And it's a message I also have for researchers out there. And this is really crucial. Never, ever ignore it. Never, never, because this is massive. It's in as
Hmm.
much as the experimental side of things is good. Um, the living experience is crucial, and it's the same message I take to professionals.
Hmm.
In my PhD thesis, I wrote the same. The importance of getting living experience feedback from,
Hmm.
parents, caregivers is absolutely crucial. And it's a
Right.
shame that these have been neglected severally.
And I don't think that FASD is alone in that area, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I think you can say that in academic halls of many different subjects, right?
yeah,
And it's just part of being human. We tend to all have an internal frame of reference,
yeah,
and we get caught up in things that we're interested in. Well, duh.
yeah,
We all
yeah,
want to spend our time doing things that are really interesting and cool. So, there's plenty of grace to go
yeah,
around. But when you came to the US for the conference, when you went to Seattle to present,
yeah,
um, and I've heard from several people that just absolutely loved your presentation, by the way. Um,
right.
were you not also involved in some justice system situations with the Native Americans?
Um,
That
well, when I came to Seattle, I had the opportunity to visit the tribal courts. Is
Okay.
that what? Yeah. I observed this session, and this was by invitation from some of the senior researchers. I mean, I'm sure you know Kay Kelly, who is quite a significant name, I think, in FSD United,
Yeah.
alongside Valerie. There was a bit of an international interest in observing, these proceedings because we, as researchers within this justice system field, we really think there's a lot applicable from that. So
Hmm.
we had colleagues from New Zealand, from the US, all of that from international setting attend that session, and I tell you, it was mind blowing. I left there a changed man, seeing how justice can be administered compassionately and
Hmm.
very applicable to individuals with FSD.
Okay. Can you share more about that? I mean, if it was mind-blowing, then that's something, of course, I'd like to hear more about.
Yes, certainly. I think for me, what struck me initially was, first of all, the fact that, okay, well, even starting from the physical environment of the court setting,
Hmm.
normally, I'm sure probably it may be the same in court settings in the US. Here in the UK, many times we have the judge sitting right above everyone else,
Mm,
sitting right high up.
yeah.
But getting into the tribal courts, it was just everybody was on the same level. I mean, even in terms of sitting arrangements. In fact, when the defendant comes to stand before the judge, really, sometimes they would want to tower above the judge. So those sort of modifications that look a bit unusual, but really impactful in the interaction. I think that was the first thing I noticed, which really struck me. Uh, again, the second thing that struck me was how the approach of the judge um, to even providing feedback on, for instance, her decision
Mhm.
to penalize whatever offense this individual has committed. It was very contextualized, it was very humanized, it was
Mm.
presented in such a way that you could feel that grain of, you know, contextualization to the individual's
Mm.
situation. So it was quite a powerful lesson that, I thought is something that could be, really useful in dealing
Mhm.
with individuals who may have FASD. Um,
Mhm.
the judge really felt human, you know, of course, the way she sat down, started the court session, it was not like the traditional setting at all, at all. We had, the defendant. So again, this may look a bit, but then a simple thing like just having a basket filled with gifts. So when a defendant, for instance, pays attention or obeys their sentencing mandates, the judge says, "Oh, you've not filled in any of what the court has actually asked you to do. So pick any gift from the gift basket." And they pick a gift free of charge. And I'm now like, wow. Yeah, so it was beautiful. It was a good
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
It was a good experience.
That is so very different. Not that I've been in court a lot. Well, I guess I have as a social worker.
Right.
When kids on, families that I have worked with get to
Yeah.
finalize their adoptions.
Right.
Um, and not as frequently, just supporting kids in their case plan. Are they going home yet? Are they not? That kind of
Yeah.
thing. But I don't think that's very different from um, court experiences by and large for
Right.
any purpose. So
Right.
yeah, there is in traditional courts very top down authoritative
Yeah.
um, structure. So
That's
I
right. That's
I
right.
love that approach you described.
It was beautiful, I tell you.
Yeah,
I'd never seen anything like that before then. And I just went away thinking, wow,
yeah.
wow,
I
wow.
think that
Yeah.
really holds up the message that, people who make bad decisions
Mm.
they're still people first, right?
People
They're still
first,
people
people
first.
first, people first is powerful. It's
Mhm.
powerful. People first. Yes, it was. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was good. It was good.
So, fortunately for me, none of my bad decisions have landed me in court.
Right, right, right.
Okay. So I'm curious where, you said you are in a international study now. Is that also looking at suggestibility, or what's your focus with your current project?
Yes, that's right. So following the work from my PhD, and this is again part of the reasons why I did mention at the onset of this session that the university is creating a really rich and robust environment for FSD research. Just following on from the findings of my PhD, I think the university was quite pleased with the findings and just wanted to support this line of work uh, to progress and just to see what additional evidence we could sort of produce to
Okay.
probably create more positive impact. Um, I was offered a 5-year fellowship, and
Congratulations.
yes, for me, it's just up till now I have not recovered from the news that I've been offered that. And the beauty of it is, I am not tasked with teaching students or marking scripts. I have just been locked up in a room, figuratively now. Don't call the police on the university, but I've been locked up in a room, and I've been told, sit here, do whatever you want to do, but research FASD, just research FASD and the
Yeah.
justice system.
Yeah.
So I thought it was I mean, it is a very unique and rare opportunity
Yeah.
to focus on this subject very in-depthly for a good number of years. At least for the next 2.5 years, this is just my focus. From
Okay.
the third to the fourth year, I will start just getting some leadership responsibilities and a bit of teaching, but for now, this is it. So I then
Okay.
thought, well, rather than doing what I did for the PhD in a local UK sample, how about if we come together as a group? And this is, I think, it really sits with a lot of what I think as advanced science is that collaborative working, coming together with living experience and research. All of us sit on the
Hmm.
table and, share and exchange. And with that, I decided, well, I could speak to some of the seniors who are also interested in this research, and we could all come together and investigate this subject in a much more larger dimension. So at
Hmm.
the moment, what we have is, aside the living experience panels we've developed to inform the research, we have an international steering committee of, I think, about 19 researchers from the US, the UK, New Zealand, Australia, and Canada.
Hmm.
And there are many of the names you are familiar with: Caitlin McLachlan, Natalie Brown O'Connor.
Hmm.
We have Jacqueline Pye, Anita Gibbs from New Zealand, Valerie McGinn, and many of those
Hmm.
names that have been familiar within the
Hmm.
FASD and justice system realms. And we have then agreed to collaborate on this so that we can investigate the issues of suggestibility, confabulation, compliance,
Hmm.
acquiescence. We're looking at dimensions of a bit of trauma, adaptive functioning, executive functioning, and a few other items to understand the mechanism behind these things a bit more. And we are recruiting participants from these 5 countries. So we are recruiting from the US, from
Hmm.
UK, from New Zealand, Australia, and Canada.
So
And this
what
is
does it take to be a participant?
a diagnosis of FASD,
Hmm.
age 11 and upwards, no matter how old we recruit. And the reason is because we want to study this so we want to stratify it. We would, when analyzing the data, we would analyze the group from 11 to 17,
Hmm.
from 18 to 25, and from
Hmm.
26 upwards. We want to see what changes, what's going on in these age brackets, because we know the brain at those levels are different,
Hmm.
and compare them
Hmm.
with controls to see what the vulnerabilities look like.
Yeah.
Hopefully, to try to understand what is going on, what the mechanisms are.
Yeah.
So from age 11 upwards, with a diagnosis of FASD is perfect. We're also studying if people don't have a confirmed diagnosis, but confirmed they have a record of prenatal alcohol exposure. We want
Hmm.
to compare with that group again.
Yeah.
We want to compare with control groups. So there are a few things happening to make us see a clearer picture. But the end goal of all of this is we are hoping together as a group, where at the end of this research, we can come out to say, well, these are our findings collectively. We've
Hmm.
looked at the data. If the data supports us, we can clearly say, well, these things we are speaking about is not just localized to the US,
Yeah.
the UK, or Canada. It is the same everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is
And, one thing that I found myself curious about as I was listening to you speak is that for so many, looking at the population at large, right? Not just
Yeah,
everybody, the global
yeah,
pop.
yeah,
Um, your mind, the way being able to make independent adult, responsible choices,
yeah.
you really don't get there until around 25,
Mm,
right?
mm,
That's
mm,
the age when, oh, maybe my parents weren't so stupid. And that adolescent
yeah,
angst, where you have
yeah,
to
yeah,
you have to hate your parents in order to
yeah,
want to leave, right? And you finally get past that, and
yeah,
things start to solidify and start to settle, and you
yeah,
start to feel like an adult, right?
Yeah.
Um, for many of us with FASD, we are on a slower developmental trajectory.
Yeah.
Bodies are that age, but developmentally, there's a
Yeah.
bit of a lag. And
Yeah.
what I've come to understand, I've heard it said, I kind of concur, but again,
Yeah.
without any proof, that our catch-up point is about 10 years later.
Right.
It's around 35.
Right.
And I would be very curious to see if you find that in your research.
Yes, certainly is what we would really look at. Some of those nuances, some of those
Mhm.
inner bits of, just salient features that
Yeah.
ordinarily you wouldn't see by just comparing
Yeah,
at
because
just a group of adolescents, but
you
looking
know,
across the age ranges.
yeah. When we come into our own, right, and feel solid in the way we see ourselves, I think that's
Yeah,
when we become a little less
yeah,
suggestible, a little less
yeah,
gullible.
right.
Um, and we're not as compliant because we're less afraid to speak our truth, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
although that's a phrase that really irritates me.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm.
Yeah, the truth cannot be owned. We don't have unique truths. We have perspectives.
All right, right,
Truth
right.
is truth.
Oh,
We
yeah,
have
right,
perspectives which can be wildly different
right.
and valid,
Yeah. Yeah, I know
but they're
perspectives
perspectives.
differ. Perspectives differ. Yes, certainly we would be wanting to look at those differences, and
Yeah.
the the interesting bit will be because yes, not only are we looking at the age range, but we are also comparing to these other groups across
Mhm.
the age range. So 11 to 17-year-olds with confirmed diagnosis of FASD compared to a
Mhm.
control group, compared to a
Yeah.
group with alcohol exposure without confirmed diagnosis, but with
Yeah.
other diagnoses like ADHD and autism, and the fourth group without a confirmed diagnosis with
Yeah.
alcohol exposure, but without ADHD or any other developmental disorder. So
Yeah.
essentially, there are four groups across the
Okay.
spectrum. It is quite, yeah, if yes, that's what
I
we
can't
want to
wait to
see.
read this. So you
Yeah.
hope to have a paper 5 years from now?
Well, hopefully, what the way the research has been designed is we are not spanning the whole 5 years. We have
Okay.
to have taken 2 years of the fellowship to look at this. So recruitment of participants will take a year and a half.
Yes.
So from now until next year around this time, we're still recruiting and a bit more, probably till end of next year or early upper year, we
Mhm.
finish up and start analyzing and writing up. So hopefully somewhere around the second and half year of this, we should be able to start um, flagging publications from this collaborative work.
Yeah. Yeah. This is exciting work.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Patricia. I remain grateful certainly to individuals like yourselves, organizations, and senior researchers who have been before the younger ones like myself, who have been consistently on this journey, banging the drums. You
Mhm.
have been the ones who have endured all of the criticism, the resistance, the rebuttals. And I personally, I just feel indebted to, the perseverance, persistence of the families, the young people, organizations, senior researchers who have endured all of this and created this platform that, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I personally can sort of step on to do this work even more easily.
Yeah. Well, I would love to have you back on again sometime to talk about how things are going. Um, so,
Anytime,
all
anytime,
right.
anytime.
And I will definitely be following you on LinkedIn, to
Yeah,
kind of keep tabs with how things are going. And this is
certainly.
just
Yeah.
such important work, and I'm so glad you're doing it.
Thank you, Patricia. It's an honor. It's certainly for me the opportunity of a lifetime
Yeah.
to contribute anything, if at all, to such an important area that has
Yeah.
been very neglected over the years.
Part of me wants to say, I wish that I had stumbled into FASD early in my career, but
Mm,
the
mm,
reality is we need to celebrate the timing, whether it's early or late.
mm,
I was in my mid-50s when I discovered I'm pretty good at this training thing and it's a lot of fun,
yeah,
which changed things for me. And then the next
right,
change was when it was children and families on my caseload that brought me to FASD.
right,
Um,
right.
in that process, I discovered, oh my gosh, I'm on the spectrum too. And,
Yeah,
and that reality, that realization rather, that
yeah,
there's so many adults
yeah,
who've been living their lives without understanding themselves,
yeah.
because a diagnosis changes nothing and everything at the same time. It
Mm,
doesn't
mm.
change the
That's
facts and the
powerful. Mm,
events
yeah,
of
yeah,
life, but it does change your perspective. And
truly, truly.
it's one of those topics that once it takes hold of you,
Yeah,
it sinks its teeth into you like a pit bull and will not let go,
yeah,
right?
certainly, certainly.
And I do not say that to offend any pit bull owners in my circle.
Yeah,
I yeah, my in-laws dog he's a pity and he's just the sweetest thing in the world. I
yeah,
actually I all the pitties that I know are
yeah,
sweet. So that was not meant to offend at all. And
yeah.
if it did, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
But
I
it's
mean,
it's FASD is just one of those things that is so profound. You know, it
go on, sorry.
it just changes the way you look at life
It
and
does,
the way
it
you
does.
understand people and behavior.
Yeah, it does. Through, I mean, I wouldn't say I have spent as much time as many of the seniors who have been in this before now, but in my little experience, I have never spoken to anyone about FASD and what it is all about, and they just walk away, and just shrug their shoulders. It becomes a moment of deep reflection. It becomes a moment of deep thought. The room falls silent. People just, yeah. I have never genuinely, both colleagues who research in the arts, media, whatever, as researchers, when we sit to talk about the work we do, you just see the room, the atmosphere certainly changes when
Mhm.
the talk on FASD begins because this is real,
Yeah.
it's something that we can see it in the society everywhere. And
Mhm.
I agree with you, it's profound, really profound.
Mhm. Well, I've been so delighted to have you on the show. But our time is wrapping up already, amazingly. It disappeared
It
out
doesn't
from
feel
under
like it,
us.
Patricia. Where has it gone to?
Oh,
Who's
yeah. Anyway, so where can people follow you? Do they do you should I put an email into the show notes if they want to reach out to you or if they want to be a subject in your studies?
Yes, I can share with you the link for
Okay.
interest, the flyers. My
Okay.
email is there, LinkedIn. Yes, any which way is convenient, I would respond.
Okay.
Yes, I'm that flexible.
Okay.
I quite active on LinkedIn, and again, it's just principally because of the idea of advocacy and speaking to professionals, because I find them a lot there.
Hmm.
The police, the judges, and all of that. And yeah, so for instance, I know we're wrapping up, but during my PhD, I was invited to contribute to two court cases
Hmm.
involving young people with FASD as a second year PhD student. The second young person got a discharge and acquittal when the judge read my report because I assessed the young person.
Hmm.
But then how I got even into that referral was just a post on LinkedIn for one of the papers I published on police interviews and FASD. So
Hmm.
one of the lawyers saw it and rang me up to say, look, there's a case happening, and you are the person we found talking about this and researching this. And I just thought, oh, that could be powerful,
Yeah.
just speaking out and talking about this. We could as well, just like you do, begin to,
Mhm.
push a lot of
Mhm.
professionals out of their comfort zone
Yeah.
and,
Yeah. Well,
get them.
I think part of it is the need to help people shift their
Mhm.
perspective,
Yeah,
how they understand behavior,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because the world at large and all of the systems that run it
yeah,
are based on the behavior paradigm, where all behavior is
certainly.
chosen, it's
Yeah,
intentional,
exactly, exactly,
um,
exactly.
and which enables us to be very judgmental
Yes,
toward
it does.
our neighbors, right?
It does.
Um, but really, behavior is there's nothing moral about it. There's no good
Mm,
behavior, bad behavior. Behavior's just how something operates,
mm,
how a living being operates. And so what we do is a reflection of how well or poorly our mind is working at the time, right? It's very brain dependent. And
that's right.
learning to look at that, and I think of the mental health system because I was a part of that before I moved to California and
Right,
flipped over to social work.
right,
I was a therapist, I was a clinician.
right.
um, it doesn't really matter what discipline our study is. We're all trained with that premise that
Right,
behavior is chosen,
that's
and
right.
learning to see it differently, that there are neurological reasons,
Yeah,
why we do some of the things we do. Really, it's a perspective that everybody
it's
needs.
powerful. It
Instead of
is.
saying, what's wrong with him that he would do something like that?
Yeah, yeah,
We need to say, well, what's hard for him? Why, where's the frustration coming from?
yeah,
Or the depression or whatever we're seeing. Mental health tends to want to take all the negative behaviors aside, away
yeah.
without realizing what do those behaviors protect them from,
Yeah, I mean,
more
it's
judgment.
certainly it's certainly a principle in science, and I mean the world life generally. Therefore, every effect there's always a cause.
Hmm.
So nothing happens without a cause. There's always, for every effect you see, for every output, there's always, a cause. And this is the deep reflection of FASD brings.
Hmm. Yeah. And certainly we, as a collective, we tend to be more impulsive.
Mm,
But if our brains are wired in such a way that, we can't link cause and effect
yeah,
very well, then what would hold us back from being impulsive, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah,
the rush to judgment does a great disservice, where
yes, it does.
curiosity can guide the way toward good accommodations.
Certainly, certainly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm
Right.
so excited by the work that you're doing, and I look forward to future updates. And in the show notes, everyone, you will find information about how to reach out to Dr. Gilbert. And in the meantime, feel free to hop on over to patreon.com/living with FASD podcast. It is a free community to join. However, if you feel so led to help defray the costs of production, then you can join at a paid level of $5 a month or $10 a month or 15, and that will help me meet the costs of continuing to bring you really good content week after week. And so, yeah, another week has come and gone. Thank you for your time. I'm glad, so grateful you took time out of your busy lives to listen to the episode today. And we'll see everybody next week. Dr. Gilbert, thank you again so much, so very much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure speaking to you on this platform. Thank you for all that you do.
Oh, you're welcome. It truly is my pleasure. Everyone, have a great week. See you next time on Living with FASD.